Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is VIN0481, VIN481. Sorry, the dog is drinking her water here. Anyway, this is a 26, will you stop? I'm leaving that in the video. This is a 2016 083, paint code 083, which is white with gold flake with LA30 interior, which is the red interior with the standard carbon fiber trim. This popped up at Carvana in Virginia, and it looks like it is a New York and Pennsylvania car until it recently moved to Virginia. It has 100,000 miles on it, and they're asking $38,500, and it was reserved within about 4 hours of it being listed. So very quick for the sale. So with Carvana, there's always like the try before you buy. So just because it's reserved doesn't necessarily mean it's sold until it's actually gone from their website. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into everything else. The production statistics, white with red is the most common color combination on the GSF. 54% of these cars were either black or white. This is white on with red interior, the most common color combination. 648 out of the 2,348 cars I've identified for the US 49 were ultra white. Of those 648, 360, not quite half, or a little more than half, Scott can't do math, 360 had red interior. Specific for 2016, there are 371 out of the 1,418 cars. Out of the 371, 212 had LA30 interior, red interior. This car, at its rarest, is one of 212. So as far as GSFs go, as common as they come. The rare ones, the 1 of 8s, 1 of 30, 1 of 1, things like that. This is 1 of 212. Carfax, Epic VIN, and AutoCheck. So Carfax shows this as a 2-owner, no accident car. Epic VIN shows this as a 3-owner, no accident car. Epic VIN, I don't put a lot of weight in the reporting of the number of owners. AutoCheck shows this as a 2-owner, no accident car. So I think it is safe to assume this is a 2-owner, no accident car. Previous sales. Looks like it went on sale January of 2016, $88,000 in New Jersey. And 9 months later in October of 16, $67,000, so it was already used, and also in New Jersey with 6,200 miles. And then the next time it was for sale was January of 2020, $54,500 in Pennsylvania with 27,000 miles, which looks like where this current owner, before it was being traded into Carvana, looks like that's where they acquired it. So they've had it for about the last 5 years or so. And here it is in October of 2025, now at Carvana in Virginia with almost 100,000 miles, $38,500. So this is normally where I would show you the pictures. However, the only pictures I have of this car are the previous sale pictures, and there's only 2. And so you can see that was 5 years ago. This car, I would fully expect it with the mileage like this, and it spent its entire life in New England, that it is pretty crusty and rusty underneath. I've seen what kind of Ohio and the Midwest, Nebraska, those kind of winters do to a car, but I know that it's so much worse in New England. The rust belt, the salt belt, all of that. This car, I would assume, is gonna be pretty rusty underneath. And I think that that probably has a lot to do with the price. And also pre-purchase inspections, when you get them done in these areas, they'll say, oh, it's not that bad. Well, you know, not that bad to somebody who lives in New England versus somebody who lives in Texas or California, that's a big difference. And so if you're buying this, I would probably look at more like just basic transportation, not as an enthusiast car, because you have things that are going to be very rusty and going to be expensive to replace when they break, because they're going to continue to deteriorate, especially if it continues to be winter driven. Hypothetically here, let's say this car was not a winter driven car. I don't think that's the case with the mileage, but let's just say it's perfect underneath. Pricing wise, 100,000 miles, $38,000, I think it's perfectly in line with where the market is for these cars with 100,000 miles. Now, if you could get it cheaper, sure, 35,000, something like that, but I think at 38, you know, that's pretty much spot on with where the market is for a clean title, no accident car with this kind of mileage. I think that, to me, the winter driving, that's a big detracting factor for me, but that's, of course, I'm in Texas. I have the availability of cars that don't rust. And so these cars, there's a lot of steel on them, and they're going to be subject to corrosion and deterioration, especially now this car being 9 years old, going on 10 years old. So you're talking about 9 or 10 winters of driving, and it will deteriorate, it will rust a car pretty quickly when it spends its whole life up there. So the best you can hope for is that it isn't rusty underneath, and that all the associated parts, the brake lines, the fuel lines, suspension components, steering components, everything else is fine. But you want to assume the best, but plan for the worst, also because there are no photos to look at otherwise. So now onto the service history. It's pretty well serviced until about the end of 2023, October of 23. So like the last 2 years, but 32,000 miles of use is pretty much unknown. And I looked at the Carfax and AutoCheck too, because sometimes it'll list certain services that are done by third parties. There's nothing. So the big question mark for the last 30,000 miles on what's been done to this car. And you're gonna buy it from Carvana. They're gonna throw everything that was in the glove box away because they wanna protect the privacy of the owners. So you're flying blind with this car. So that, to me, kind of decreases the potential value because you don't know how much has been done, so you have to assume it hasn't been done to catch it up on service. The first entry of note is November of 2016. It was just a wheel repair, not unusual to see. August of 2017, a door seal was noted as squeaking, and they removed the fender liner to gain access to the bracket behind it. Pretty common to see on these cars, and that's a pretty common fix. Maybe something got bumped, or it was bent in shipping, not really, but bent during the installation. Something like that, but it's not unheard of to see that, and I don't think anything weird comes of it. February of 2019, the JLB recall was done. That's the high pressure fuel pumps. So good to see that's done. And they got an estimate for front scratches and dents. It doesn't say where, it doesn't say what, it doesn't say the severity, but it looks like about 3 months later, in May of 2019, they approved it, and it says paint work, but it doesn't say what all was done. So I don't know if just maybe the front bumper was repainted, something like that. You know, being winter driven, maybe you have sand and gravel and things that pit the front end. It's hard to say, but just know that back in 2019, 6 years ago, it had some paint work done somewhere, I would assume on the front. On that note, it is also not an accident. It was just refinishing something. So I don't know, it could, I don't think it's an unreported accident. I think it's just wear and tear, and it was getting refinished. The car had, I didn't write down how many miles the car had, but at 2019, the mileage was that. So it looks like it's been quite a bit of time since then, so it's probably back to being peppered and road rashed and everything else. Kind of another telltale sign that this car has been winter driven is January of 2020, which is common on Rust Belt cars, the license plate bolts snapped off. And basically, because they got rusted in place, you try to remove them to change the license plate, it snaps the bolts off. So they said that here, and they re-drilled and re-tapped those holes. So you have a license plate again. Also at that same service, the KLG or the 19LE05 customer service campaign was done, which is the programming for the firmware for the GPS. It shows the GPS in the wrong location, things like that. That was corrected here. And after that, it's basically just oil changes until 78,000 miles. So what do we not see done? 60,000 mile service, that's the big one. Has not been done on this car, and now it has 100,000 miles. So that at that point, I would be looking at doing spark plugs, belts, hoses, all the fluids, the transmission service, the TVD, the torque vectoring differential, brake fluid, all of that needs to be done. Assume none of it has been done. There's no evidence of it unless it was done DIY, but it's basically nothing has been done that needs to be done on this car. Other common issues that I see, lower control arm bushings on the front, don't see where those have been replaced, so check the insides of the front tires, make sure you don't see an excessive wear. Also on this one, the low pressure fuel pump has not been reprogrammed, so if you're sitting in the car, turn off the HVAC, turn off the stereo, just sit there with the engine running, listen behind you and see if you hear a humming or a buzzing noise. That is the low pressure fuel pump, and there is a reprogramming available for that to quiet that down. Obviously the carbon fiber trim. Every single one of these cars, if it hasn't been replaced, it's going to need it. This car being from a cold climate, I would assume that it's going to have at least some of the panels in the interior trim having the carbon fiber delaminating. It's just, there's no way to get around it, especially in the colder climates, but that's probably affecting this car too. So also the ZLZ, or to the Canadians, the ZLZ program, which has not been completed on this car, that covers the deforming, delaminating, sticky dash and it is covered for 10 years from the in-service date. So this car is getting really close to the end of that. And so if it is any kind of sticky or deforming or anything, Lexus will cover that free of charge for you for 10 years from the in-service date. So if you're buying this car, definitely something to look at. So, and finally, would I purchase this car? I think based on the winter driving, I would not. And that comes down to personal preference. I would not buy a rusty car, but if it's something that it doesn't bother you, or if it's not too terribly rusty where it's not going to continue to rust away, if you're going to continue to winter drive it, then maybe it is for you. But it needs a lot of catching up on maintenance, and there's a big question mark for like the last 30,000 miles, almost 3 years, of what has been done with it other than oil changes. And so I think that you obviously need to check brakes, tires, the valley plate, all the other things that commonly affect these cars. But there's a lot that's needed. So maybe if you can get it cheap enough, but I don't know what that price would be. For me, like low 30s, because you're going to have to spend at least $5,000 or $6,000 catching everything up. The valley plate, I am almost positive that you would have to do the valley plate pretty soon, if not already. So inspect it, make sure that it's not leaking. But at 100,000 miles, you're probably looking at like water pumps, other things that come with higher mileage. But I don't know. For me, I would probably pass on it. But again, that's a personal preference. It is a clean title, no accident car, but maintenance, question mark. And so the price is getting where it should be, but I think based on what it needs, probably needs to be a little bit lower than that. And of course, Carvana, you can't negotiate with them. $38,500 is the price. So if it comes back on the market, you'll know what to expect. So anyway, I wish I had more for you for pictures and things like that on this one, but that's all I've got. So this is VIN 0481. Thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you soon.